I was one of these functioning depressive people that are existing, but nobody talks about us. And I was even doing my job at the university as a tutor and giving workshops. All of a sudden there was this moment, they said, Wolfie, everything will be okay.
Welcome to Psychedelics in Recovery Integration Radio, a safe space where PIR, also known as persons in recovery, come and share their experience, strengths and hope with us, with you. My name is Anne and I'm a person in recovery and your host today. This radio is part of PIR's ongoing effort to carry the message of recovery to those still suffering. In alignment with the 12 traditions that guide our fellowship, this program will not be funded by outside contributions. PIR as an organization has no opinion on outside issues. While we discuss plant medicine and psychedelics in this episode, PIR does not promote or endorse their use. The spiritual intention of PIR and of this broadcast is to create diverse, safe, and sacred spaces for all who wish to recover, always striving for humility over hubris and principles before personalities. Whether you're new to the idea of integrating psychedelics or plant medicine in your recovery process, new to recovery, or a long-time member of the fellowship, our aim is to create a space of curiosity, connection, and hope. In this first series, entitled Journeys of Healing, we explore the intersection of recovery and the transformative potential of psychedelic medicine through some of our members' experience. So settle in, open your mind, and let's walk this path together. This is the PIR podcast, Integration Radio. And today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Wolfgang, who is come from Berlin to share his experience, strengths and hope and story of recovery and discovery of psychedelics with us. Welcome, Wolfgang. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, welcome. And first of all, I really want to thank you for this beautiful introduction. I was like, and also for the invitation. And I hope that I can be somehow of service.
Oh, I'm sure you will. You will be. I've heard bits of your stories by listening to your shares on the regular Wednesday meeting, but I look forward to hearing how it all started. If you can tell us a little bit about what took you to recovery, when, what were the circumstances, and describing recovery before psychedelics, and then if you can tell us a bit more about how you met, how you encountered PIR and psychedelics afterwards.
Okay, I will try. Beautiful question, but there's one problem because I was actually born in 1950, which makes it a very, very long story because I'm 76 now. And so I have to compress a little bit. And, but to start with the start, before I ever heard anything about addiction or problems or whatever, my life was quite, I felt it's quite normal until I was committed to a mental hospital when I was 6 years old, which I have hardly any recollection. I only remember that they told me that I had some kind of problems with my aggressions, and then I have a blackout. So this is how all started. Nowadays, mental doctors, they would say that's a traumatic situation, a 2-year blackout, and blah blah blah. I was medicated at the time. There probably was a lot of circumstances like abuse and stuff. So this is how my life started. And when I came back to my family, I was always an alien. It was a nice family. My parents were like survivors of the Second World War, which is hardly to imagine, but it was like shortly after the Second World War. So everybody was traumatized maximum and so on. So when I was like 13 or 14 years old, I was heavily stuttering. I was an outcast in school. I was quite good in school. I was singing in a choir in the opera, which was basically my life, and I was stuttering like hell, so I could not really say anything. I was very shy, and then a doctor prescribed some medication, which nowadays you would call it like speed. And I started to take Ein-Eins, and all of a sudden I was able to approach girls at parties and say like, "Do you want to dance with me?" And from this moment on, I knew that I have to take this medication till the end of my days because it was the only possibility to be like a normal human being. And it was the it was the 60s, and even like it was a normal thing, to be involved in drugs and pop music. And when I found out that there are even stronger medications, and that it was kind of attractive, even, because all the people I adored, all the musicians I loved, be it Jimi Hendrix or the Stones or whatever, everybody was taking drugs. So I thought like, wow, this is a solution. I can I can be somebody that is a drug addict, which was cool, and I can have a life. And I started very early to have a career in the movie business. I became a DOP using, which was absolutely okay at the time. I was running around with a silk scarf, that signaled I'm a heroin addict, because we used the scarf. Anyway, so this was the late 60s. My first detox was in 1969, and I was 19 years old. And I thought that's like graduation. Now I have it written. I'm officially a drug addict. And to make a long story very short, was from then on, I had a lot of times in mental hospitals and jails. Until 77, I spent basically most of the time um, in institutions. I didn't know anything else. I was not expecting anything. I thought like this is. I didn't think anything. I was just living the thing. There was no talk about recovery or like 12-step programs. There was AA somewhere, but I didn't feel like I'm an alcoholic, so I'm not supposed to be there. And through a lot of coincidences, which make a nice movie script, but it's too long for a podcast. Through a lot of coincidences, I was forced, more or less, to be clean for the first time in my life. And this was in 78, 1978. I was 28 years old. And sorry to say, but it had nothing to do with 12-step programs. I just ended up in a situation where I was actually forced violently to not use. And for the first time, I was on an island in the Mediterranean, Corsica, and I didn't even know where I am. Somebody had like, yeah, that's the too long story. Anyway, I got clean for the first time, and I went swimming for the first time, since years. And in the water, I had like a feeling of maybe I could do this another 2 or 3 months. Maybe I can give it a try. My weight was about like 54 kilos. I was like, I had a French nickname, Le Clou. It means like a nail. I was like, I was not existing. But I started to work, and I started to like in a holiday camp, as a handyman, and somebody offered me a job for the next season, and I became a windsurf teacher in 1978. This was crazy. I was chain smoking, full of needle scars, and teaching French tourists how to windsurf, planche à voile, and it was just crazy. Anyway, so I mentioned this because this was how I thought it's going. I'm gonna like relapse once or twice a year. That's the price I have to pay. And then I'm gonna try, maybe I can make it a year or maybe two. I had no idea about 12-step programs, but I read a lot of stuff. I had a lot of experience with institutional treatment at the time, which was bad, to say it mildly. There was no knowledge about addiction or something. You just got incarcerated and they cleaned you up, and then you had some behavioral therapy, whatever. So for the next 11 years, I tried to stay clean. I relapsed once or twice a year. I had mental problems like hell, anxiety attacks, depression, panic attacks, which I kind of thought that it belongs to my life. You know, it has been before using, so probably it's going to be after using. And I tried to change circumstances. You know, I was living in the Caribbean for some time on a little island, isolated. I went back to Paris because I thought like I need to be in the movie business again. I started my own production company. I made money. I had a duplex apartment on Rue Soulieu, 17 arrondissement in Paris. This means I was rich, and but I was not clean. And this was actually in '89 that I gave up completely because I was like talking to a medical doctor at the time, and he said like the doses that I have to prescribe you in downers in medication kills a horse. So this is the price that you pay that you don't relapse. And I was like, yeah, but that's paradox. I'm using medication to not relapse, you know, I'm using drugs to not relapse, you know. And that was the first time. And he was reading the thing to me. He said, like, this is really too much. And I said, but what can I do? And he said, I have no idea. I'm going to go down to the bar and I'm going to have a red wine. You know, it was in Paris. And I would suggest that you go to a meeting. Honestly, you know, it was a very, very expensive psychotherapist. So I thought, like, okay, idiot, you know, I'm going to do this. And I went to my first NA meeting, and somebody said, Leo, you're not clean. You should do a detox. And I went with my Armani suit and my suitcase. I went to a hospital and said, like, for the first time in my life, after spending years in institution, it was the first time that I went on my own free will. And I said, like, hello, I need to detox, you know, on mother's little helpers, not even heroin. I hadn't touched opiates in 11 fucking years. Anyway, so I ended up in NA, and I got clean on the 1st of May in 1989, which makes it now 36 years. And I was very, very grateful. But I was aware at the time. I was not. I didn't have this pink cloud that many people share about 12-step programs. And everything is gonna be fine. I was prepared that staying clean is not solving my problems. That was clear, you know. And I thought, you know, everything else, you know, all the stuff that they told me, you know, don't use, don't go to places where you have been using. I was not interested in, quite honestly, you know, but two things, obviously, were the two things that I did not want to confront. It was fellowship, hanging out with these strange uh, spiritual addicts, you know, and spirituality. All this 11-step stuff, you know, I saw like it's not my thing. So I knew these are the two things that I have to confront. I have to do. I went to a meeting every fucking day, making sure that nobody realizes that I'm a newcomer. It was kind of easy because I had moved to New York, you know, so I had like hundreds and hundreds of meetings, and I stayed clean. And my mental problems uh, started to reappear in a brutal way. All the anxiety attacks, all the panic attacks, you know, I became what they called they call it a heart neurosis at the time. This is the psychosomatic problem. I just had like heart attacks, panic attacks, you know. I was hospitalized a few times, you know, they gave me injections to prepare me for the operation, then the heart attack was gone. So it was kind of clear that I have a psychosomatic problem, you know. But working the steps did not solve the problem. Now, to make another time jump, you know, I did a lot of service in NA. I did international service. I did PR, medical conferences, and I read shitloads of books. I also read a lot about from Stanislav Grof.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew somehow in the back of my mind, also with my experience of my drug use in the 60s and 70s, I knew somehow that psychedelics are opening a door. I had experienced it. I was not interested in psychedelics, when I was using, because my using was like, I have to shut down. I have to forget. I didn't want to open up to any universe. But I had the experience because I was a hippie drug addict. So I was using a lot of LSD 25 and it rang a bell. I thought like, maybe, with all my meditation and I spent times in Buddhist monasteries and in Catholic monasteries and meditating my ass off. And I knew somehow maybe in 2 or 3 incarnations, I can maybe solve the problem of my trauma. But I don't have the time for 2 incarnations. And then I heard this stuff, by François Boursat, by yeah, Marty Pauling, he came much later, and I started to think maybe this would be a solution. And then while I was like reading this stuff, not being able to approach it because it would have been a relapse, how can I make this short? I had a brain tumor. It was 14 years ago, and I was hospitalized, and they told me I have another 5 days, and my chances of survival because it was at the stem, at the brain, so they had to operate in the dark. And the team told me quite honestly that my chances, of being woken up with a little bit of like ability to still think and talk and walk is like 1 to 7, which is not very good.
No, it's not.
No, it's not very good. It was brutal, as I had 5 days to concentrate, and it was a very important moment for me, because all of a sudden I saw the fucking program works because I had a, I, I had, I had the allowance from my surgery team. They said like, listen, you are a drug addict. I told them that I'm a drug addict. It's important for the anesthesia. And they said like, listen, the only thing that we want you to do is not go crazy. So please, prepare for the operation somehow. But you are the specialist, we just open the door, you can ask for anything you need to calm down. And I said, like, wow, that's great. I'm gonna like blah 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 and flip out, I'm gonna use this and this and that. And I had these ideas, and every night, I do remember the first night, I was there. I said like, I'm gonna call the night nurse and I'm gonna like take fentanyl, like I'm gonna to take this, I have to calm down. And then I thought like, fuck, if I take this stuff, I wake up tomorrow morning, I can't remember but my stupid pin code, that I have to give to my wife, girlfriend, whatever you wanna call her. So maybe I'm not using it. I can do it tomorrow. Quite honestly, it was not like the spiritual awakening, and I want to be clean or whatever. I didn't want to be clean. I just, yeah. Anyway, I survived it, but everybody told me afterwards, this is adding to your trauma. So, Mr. W, you really have to do something. This is not gonna go well because you are like your system is slowly regenerating. I had to learn to speak again, which is a kind of a miracle if you listen to me now. Stuttering and brain tumor, I was like, like after stroke. I had to relearn walking, I had to relearn talking. But I was traumatized, my physical system was traumatized. And I heard ongoing, from the therapists, also in the rehab when I was like reworking, they said you have to do something. But maybe the conventional therapy is not really working with you. So I tried, behavioral therapy. Quite honestly, it was not really working. It was nice, nice contact, nice blah blah blah. But so the question came closer, and then coincidences. We all know. I met somebody in the underground scene because there was no legal way to use psychedelics at the time. I actually met somebody in the underground scene. It was a psychotherapist that works with mushrooms, and we had talks, and he said, "Listen, if you want to try, I can guide you. You do the preparation with your therapist, and at the same time, we just published in an aid this one pamphlet. Some of you might know it about medication in recovery. And it says very clearly, it's a pamphlet, which is typically a stupid but very North American, but it says very clearly, if you have a medical issue, if you have a mental issue, and you have a prescription, get a second opinion. But if two specialists tell you to take a certain medication, you are clean. And I was like, wait a second, if psychedelics would be legal and I would have all the preparation and the set and setting in a therapeutic circumstance, then this could maybe be helping me with my fucking problems. I didn't want to talk to God or the universe or get my ego dissolved or whatever. I just wanted to get rid of my anxiety attacks. And I did this one session and it was kind of okay.
Sorry to interrupt here. Was that a session of psilocybin?
It was psilocybin and it was really, grown mushrooms illegally at the time. But it did not bring the wow effect. But shortly afterwards, I know it sounds dramatic, but that's my life. Shortly afterwards, I had heavy depressions again. I tried everything, meditation and blah, blah, blah. And actually, I had a heart attack, which they called a heart attack. It was 4 years later. It was 1 year after this psychedelic assisted therapy session. And I landed in a hospital, and they wanted to put in a stent. And I saw it on the screen because they let me watch, that they could not get through. They said, like, listen, sorry, we have to do a bypass because we can't get in. It's so cramped. So yes, they flew me to the other hospital and blah blah blah. Long story again, life-threatening triple bypass. 1 week later, when they let me go, they told me that this is probably a prolonged panic attack. Now, this is 36 years later. They tell me exactly the same thing, that, it's probably not my thing. And I was like, yeah, but this is mental. They said, no. Your brain is killing you, because your heart doesn't know. You saw it on the screen. We could not get through, So you have to do something about it. And it was a year later that I went to my cardiologist. I did meditations. I did breath work and blah, blah, blah. And my cardiologist said, like, listen, it's the fifth time that you come again to do an MRI, but sorry to say, I'm the one that does the plumbing, and I tell you, you're not perfect, but the plumbing is kind of okay. But you have a problem with your roof. You need somebody that takes care of your fucking brain. And if you don't do it, you will have a panic attack again, and it's probably going to kill you next time. And then I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? And quite honestly, now it becomes kind of romantic, because, through coincidences, I met two people that just founded the Mind Foundation in Berlin, which is Mind Foundation and Ovid Clinic. You can Google it, The Mind Foundation is at the moment doing a 3-phase study, psilocybin study legally here at the Charité in Berlin. And these two people, Hendrik Jung-Abele and Andrea Jung-Abele, they were the first that said, like, there is a possibility, Wolfgang, not now, it's not legal yet, but we are working on it, that it becomes a possibility to be prescribed. That's very important because not everybody has the money to go to Ecuador or to Brazil or whatever and do the fancy ayahuasca tourism, And I was like, yes, if you're working on this, I'm going to join. And that's what I actually did, As a sideline, I met people that are kind of semi-legal working with psilocybin in a truffle form, which is available and not so expensive. And I had in the last 4 years another 5 sessions. with psilocybin, with truffles, and also with LSD in a absolutely not very funny therapeutic setting. And I know lots of people don't want to hear it, because we all want to talk to God and have a little bit of enlightenment and listen to the music. Yes, I would also love to have this. I have it when I'm not using psychedelics, you know. But I use psychedelics not only mainly, but not more purely to get slowly to my trauma, you know, and to open up. Now, this means in 3 years, I I did not have this cruel depressions that blocked me out completely. I was one of these functioning depressive people, that that are existing, but nobody talks about us. I was even doing my job at the fucking university as a tutor and giving workshops, and I had to force myself in the morning crying, to get out of bed. And my only dream was, to finish the day and get back into bed. But I performed. I was a freelancer. I had to make fucking money. Yeah. So I performed, and everybody thought like, he's a little bit serious, this Mr. W. Oh, he's okay. No, I was not okay. I didn't enjoy anything. And this got better.
And didn't you feel that you could share the burden of your depression and mental health in NA meetings?
Yes. The thing is, I shared the problems. I shared, and I had good talks. Quite honestly, my sponsor had the same depressions, but he came from a completely different environment. He didn't have the anxiety and panic attacks. So he kind of did the same thing that I did. We lived through it, yeah, by sharing, by meditating, and blah blah blah. But he okay. I don't want to talk about him, but my problem was I had the somatic side, and my medical doctor said like, no 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 no, we cannot do this another 2 months. You have to do something. You either go on medication, and it means like SSRIs, which I do not use. Sorry for everybody that is using them. SSRIs are not a solution. They just numb you out. And me personally,
And they treat the symptom, not the
yeah,
cause.
yeah. There's a very, very interesting talk, that is, I think it's even online, at the Insight Conference, which, oh my God, I have to make it short. Insight Conferences was a conference where also Rick Doblin was invited and blah, blah, blah. We had great talks. And one of the founders of the Mind Foundation, Dr. Gerd Gründer, he's our main figure. He's a pharmacologist that works now in the treatment area, and he's one of the pushers to get psilocybin legalized. Now he shared how he came to change sides, and he told the story of his brother-in-law that he himself had medicated with SSRIs because he was working in a bank and needed to perform and started to have depressions. So Dr. Gründer gave him the SSRIs, the serotonin blockers, and his brother-in-law could not, and they tried to set the doses down after 1 year, and the symptoms got worse than before. So Gerd Gründer realized as a doctor, as a pharmacologist, that this is an addiction, and he says it very clearly. He says it very loudly, without any doubt. We are getting people addicted to this stuff because we cannot solve the problem. You stop the SSRIs, you have the depression again. And in my case, it was not only the depression, I stopped SSRIs, I have the heart attack again. So no, 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 no. Yeah? So my way, and I'm not promoting it. If I could, quite honestly, if I could do it without uh,
Taking anything.
PAT, I would do it. I love to lie on the floor with my earphones on, listen to crazy ambient music, and to trip completely. I don't need any fucking LSD for it. Yeah. But if I want to get to the trauma of 18 months blackout as a child, being abused, not being able to cope. I'm a I'm a 76-year-old man, and I still have no idea what my sexuality is about. You know, this is not very funny. I want to die in peace. You know, that's my goal. I don't have more than 10 years left. But I'm not like working to do this and to have a house and a wifey and 2.5 children. I do this because I want to be in peace. Yeah? And my experience using psychedelics in a very, very clear setting is that something is opening up. Last session, I was fucking crying for 4 hours. And I was really happy to have a sitter that I know personally, is a former client, by the way, but and and we talked everything through, and she was sitting there reading and being there for me. Being there for me means I knew that she is there sitting. That was all.
Yeah, all you needed, the safety, the safe container. And how have those 5 sessions in the last 4 years of psilocybin, truffle, and LSD, how is that translated in terms of your recovery of mental health and recovery of addiction in general? What have been the improvement, noticeable improvement?
The improvement, okay, maybe I have to add that my experience is that the most important thing in PAT, in psychedelic assisted therapy, is the integration. It is crucially important. No, but we don't have a book about it. I am even like I work in integration, and I have the official title of being an integration facilitator, which quite honestly means nothing. There is not a lot of experience, but integration is a process
Yeah.
that slowly brings you to using the experience in daily life. That's maybe a shortcut.
We have a full question on what does your integration practice look like. So if you want to answer this now, as it is apropos, please feel free.
Yeah, the answer is okay. We have all the classical stuff, journal, sharing, super important. That's why I go to PIR meetings, because I cannot share this stuff openly in NA if I refer to psychedelics. And quite honestly, if you're interested, there is a way to share in NA or A, I don't know, but in NA. And I found it out with another friend that is also in PIR. We share and we do not mention psychedelics, but we are both sharing about we are in a therapy. We're in a trauma therapy. And in trauma therapy, something was relieved, my pain of like realizing that I was abandoned. And then I can share about it. I can share that I was crying for 5 hours, that I don't know how to go on, that I do a lot of meditation, that I need to talk about it, and nobody knows that I'm talking about psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
This is a trick that I learned early on in AA, because I spent times in places where there was no NA meeting, and I learned to go to AA and to say I have a drinking problem, because I was not lying. I was like just like translating it in my head. I don't have to say explicitly I'm a heroin addict. Then they kick me out. And the same I do in NA. I share about my stuff, but not mentioning that I do psychedelic assisted therapy. I do therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and my therapy is very intense. I even share sometimes that I do holotropic breath work, and then I can even share about psychedelic states of mind. And nobody knows, that I'm like that's my way, and it's not, to be accepted, but I don't like lying, I really don't like it, you know, and it is because I feel guilty afterwards. I don't want to feel guilty because that's part of so integration is for me mainly to get in contact with myself and to get away from this dream of being able to talk to God, you know, which I would love to do, but mainly to tell the world that I'm a special person that is able to talk to the universe, or that I was married to the Queen of Sheba once, which I found out in my last ayahuasca retreat in Ecuador. This is ego, you know, and I cannot afford it. If I want this state, I write a script. I'm good at it. My fantasy is beautiful, but that's very close to insanity. So integration for me is learning to talk to my neighbor. And this is what helps me. That I learned, to sit like half an hour ago. No, it's more than half an hour. Uh, I was in the street waiting for somebody, and at the same time having in my head that I have to get home to do the podcast. And I started to be a little bit panicky. I thought, but she's not coming. Now it's 1:30. I have to get back. And all of a sudden, there was this moment. They said, Wolfie, everything will be okay. Yeah, it will be okay. You will manage somehow. You either let her go or you let the podcast go. And I, well, no, I don't let the podcast go. All of a sudden, yeah, but this is experience from, I don't want to say my last session. Yes, but it was, this thing of like feeling how painful stuff can be. And at the same time, there was this feeling, and it was not from outside, it was in me that said, hey, Wolfie, baby, it's okay. Yeah. It will never be perfect, but it is okay. Look, there's a tree, there are people. You're still walking, which is a miracle. So, hey, come on, come down. These are minutes, or like that I can sit on a bench and enjoy the little early sunshine. And my mind goes like, well, fuck, you're not in the Caribbean, where's your house? Why did you have to sell your apartment in Paris? What was your career? You did not shoot the feature film. And I was like, yeah, come on. Hey, look, there are nice people walking by, flirt a little bit. You're too old, you cannot flirt anymore. And the other voice says like, hey, come on, let's have fun. Now, this voice became active in the sessions. I don't know if it's God's voice. I think it's mine, it's the better part of me.
Yeah. It reminds me, when you're describing being sat on the bench in the park, it reminds me of the ACA program, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Family, where you discover the loving parent within
Yeah.
and you care for the inner child, inner teenager. And as you're describing it, I see this. I see the loving parents emerging from the ceremonies. And some people see it as higher self, other people see it as higher power. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's probably the same.
Whatever. If you come from a culture that needs to put names and stuff on it, then please use the names. Call it God or Allah or whatever. But I come from a culture where I doubt in these entities, so I have to find my own stuff. And yes, and like you just mentioned, okay, I refer shortly to. I do have very, very few memories of these 18 months in a mental hospital for children. In 1955, Honey Bunny, in 1955, we didn't have any good children psychologists. We had killed them or exported them to the United States. You know, this was 10 years after the Second World War. It was not a nice time. So being in this, but I have nice little glimpses of memories. And one is, for instance, that I was telling stories. I remember that to other children there, I was telling stories, And yes, there was something in me that made me survive and uh, and created fantasy, you know, which nobody wanted because they were like insane. It's like, but
Yeah.
this fantasy is beautiful, yeah,
Mm.
and it still helps me if I can attach to it and and to get access to my own loving fantasy is integration. I need to reinforce it.
Mm.
There's this example that I learned in Buddhist monasteries that Europeans, Westerners, they have a problem on the left side of the balance, and then they find the solution on the left side. They put energy on the left side. Everybody that asks puts solutions on the left side, and the only possible way is put something on the other side of the balance, and you have to do it. And for them, it was like, yeah, that's what we do.
Mhm.
You cannot solve the work, but you can sit in satsang and just shut the fuck up. Yeah, but honestly, and that's in the integration, it's a little bit the same. Yes, there's crying, there's pain, there's abuse. And I go like, wow, how wonderful, you survived all this. You did not have to kill anybody. You had a stretch of prostitution, but it's a long time ago. And it's not positive thinking. It's acceptance. And it was the first time in my life
Yes.
that psychedelics helped me to accept. Yeah, naturally, if you're standing in mud, you accept first of all a lot of mud. I was not expecting that it's gonna be flowers and birds singing and angels carrying me.
Yeah, I think integration is the best integration is acceptance of what's the plant or the psychedelics have showed you.
Yeah,
Because for me, a psychedelic is not a cure. It's not a bullet. It's not a magic bullet that's going to fix me. It will show me
yeah,
where the work needs to take place to fix me, and I've got to do the work.
yeah,
And the improved neuroplasticity is obviously an added bonus.
yeah,
But that's where I have found
yeah,
that the use of psychedelics coupled with a 12-step program works well, because I can do the work through the 12 steps and go back to the bits I've missed in my step 4, go back to the bits I've missed on my step 2, improve step 11,
absolutely.
and having a way of doing the work once I know where to do it.
Yeah, yeah. And this is the dream that we actually have, that now if this phase 3 study goes through, which will take another 1.5 to 2 years. But if it goes through, then it would be legal in Germany for a psychotherapist, or no, not for a psychiatrist, to prescribe a psychedelics-assisted therapy. Not the drug. I can order it on Telegram, you know, but the whole therapy thing, because then it would be possible to at least partly finance it through health insurance. And then I can go to an NA meeting and I can say, my psychiatrist prescribed me to do this kind of therapy. So I can get rid of my fucking, not rid of my trauma, but I can like accept my trauma, make it part of me. Hello. And then there's no problem. It does not reduce the abuse, like we know from alcohol. Celebrating red wine, doesn't help an alcoholic. The problem is the alcoholism, it's not the red wine. So, it's not about drugs or if it is dangerous or whatever. At the moment, we have all these people in NA that come with the diagnosis of ADHD, and they all go like, well, yeah, I went to my psychiatrist and now I have to, and then they come and they have serotonin blockers and they have Ritalin and blah, blah. These were all drugs that I was using.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? But they have no problem sharing it, because it was prescribed.
Yeah.
And this is, I'm not saying this is like the positive outcome, but I just want to get rid of this bad, and good thing.
Yes.
I want a therapy. Yeah. I want the therapy. And yeah, and I think psychedelics are a genius way of 11 step.
Yeah, and yes, I read quite extensively of what the Marion Foundation is doing in Berlin, and by the looks of things, you are months away
Hmm.
from that trial, and I think that's the way forward. We have a very similar
Yeah.
company here. It's a private company working with the NHS on doing a similar trial, and I've seen presentation.
Mhm.
Quite bold, looking at 2027 psychedelic assisted therapy on the NHS for certain type of treatment-resistant depression and also anorexia nervosa.
Yeah.
So that's the for me that's the way forward. I don't think we'll ever get to a place of legalization, and that's not necessarily not necessarily what's required right now. If for our population, for our people in recovery, we need therapy accessible to as many people as possible,
Absolutely.
because under addiction there is trauma, and treating addiction is going to the root cause of our trauma and accepting, as you said,
100%.
accepting trauma, integrating the fact that we are traumatized being.
Yeah.
That journey of individuation Jung was talking about is looking at all our parts, even the one we're hiding ourselves. And that's where talking therapy for me has never been successful,
Yeah.
because I'm very good at talking. I can talk my way out of trouble, but I am very good at hiding. I've got protectors that are
Yeah.
keeping that trauma safe and secure like a treasure.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the thing is, what is kind of frustrating sometimes is that we kind of know all these things. You just mentioned um, Jung. We all have these conversations between Jung and Bill Wilson. In the AA program. They were talking about it in 1964. And we are still like, hiding this under the table. We all have a trauma. You can go on Instagram and you see Jung talking about addiction, or Gabor Mate talking about addiction, that this is not substance
Mm-hmm.
based, that it is blah, blah, blah. But we still hang on to this thing, oh, it's the bad drugs.
No, but things are moving slowly, but they're moving in the right direction, or so it seems.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm mindful of the time, and there is one more question I want to ask you that I ask all our guests: is what are you still struggling with? What is one challenge in your life that you're currently working to overcome, with or without psychedelics?
Me. No, it's like, uh, I don't like this word ego because we abuse it so much, you know. But this construct, this avatar, that I had, that, that I thought might be the solution, that I constructed in my need to get clean, until I was 28, I had given up completely. I'm an intelligent person. I knew what's going on. I realized when I was 24 that this is not going anywhere. Blah, 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 But from then on, when I started to have an idea that maybe I can have a life somehow, I started to create a Wolfgang. Um, the windsurf teacher, the DOP, the psychotherapist, the owner of a film company, the clean addict, the guy that goes to an acting school at age 39 that becomes an actor, that becomes an acting coach, that becomes a professor at the university. That's all a beautiful construct. It's a narrative, but it's killing me. It's killing me because I cannot identify with it. I love it. It's like, I love clothes, um, because it gives me an outer space, but by creating this kind of outer world,
Hmm.
I fell so much in love with the outer world that I forgot completely to create an inner world. Yeah. And this is what psychedelics helped me to not
Mm.
get rid of the outer world, you know? So I'm not about ego
Dissolution.
dissolution, but I'm about like, okay, let the ego be. Yes, I like nice shirts, I like to dress up, I blah blah blah. But and now the other side of the balance, I have to I have to put something on my inner life. Call it spirituality or whatever you want to call it. Uh, and did, and this is where I probably gonna work on it. Or not working. I I hope I can nourish it until I fucking die.
Could you repeat what you've just said? You said, I'm probably going to work on, because we got the connection dropped and I didn't hear it's important.
Yeah, it's important for me too because I wanted to use the NA language. I have to work on it.
Okay.
No, I cannot work on it. I worked on my outside a lot, and I'm good at it. Huh? Because as I said, I was not able to walk and talk. But seemingly, I can walk and talk again. That's a lot of work, and I'm grateful for it. But the inner work, is not working. It's a loving process. Blah. It sounds so cringe. And that's what psychedelics helped me to do. To slow down, to agree, and to say like, yeah, yeah, it's okay, Wolfie.
To get to know your inner landscape and letting it be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned internal family systems, shadow work. It's all going in this direction.
Yeah.
It's an assembly. It's a reunification of my. If I call myself a family, um, then the kindergarten needs a little bit of development. Yeah. The outside is quite okay. The outside family holiday is
Yes.
kind of okay.
Mm.
The inside is.
Now, I heard something in an ACA meeting not too long ago, which I absolutely adored. And the guy said, it's never too late to have a happy childhood.
Yeah, I heard it too.
And that's what you're describing.
Yeah,
And making that childhood happy, because that inner child is no longer scared.
yeah,
That inner child is cared for.
yeah,
And the Loving Parents Guidebook study that I've been doing for nearly 2 years now is really helped me understand this. And like you, the beginning, when you have to write a letter to your inner child and compassion and love, I was cringing all the way through, because this is not something I'm familiar with or comfortable with. But I played the game, and the result has been astonishing.
yeah,
It's still very much a work in progress. I haven't worked my step in ACA. All I've done was read the Loving Parents Guidebook study, and it's incredible. Showing up for the internal family, being in that inner landscape, and being present and mindful makes a huge difference.
yeah, yeah. And it's really healing, and that's thank you for sharing it. Um, I had a friend in NA who introduced me actually to adult children of alcohol. I was like, oh, come on, another 12-step program,
Yeah.
and he brought me the book, and and only because I was afraid that he's gonna ask what it is. I opened it, and I actually answered questions, and I started to write, and it is a really loving process.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful that you mention it because now I realize, see, that's practical integration. I just realized that my last session, which is like 6 months ago, uh, was mainly about being connected to this inner child. I I couldn't call it, because I'm too much like a intellectual psychologist, But practically, yes, I was crying, but in a relieving way, and
Yeah.
and I was just like, wow, this is like, you know, it was not they hurt you, it was just like the circumstances were not really nice, uh, and that's such a healing and warm and nice feeling.
Yeah, it is the program of the Loving Parents study. From what I understand, is very simple, but it's not easy.
Mm,
It requires time allocation. It requires being mindful. It requires letting go
mm,
of things that have been protective for years, which are not protective anymore, and they're harmful.
mm,
And for me, it was almost disappearing the critical voice, the one that said,
yeah,
on the bench, you can't flirt, you're too old, what do you think you're doing? That voice is a tiny little voice in the back of the head now. It comes back, but it's nowhere near
yeah,
the leading voice. It doesn't hold the key
yeah.
voice.
And I think now when I listen to you saying it, there was immediately a feeling that said like, no, and I don't want to lose it completely. It's part of me too, this critical part. But
Yeah.
I don't want to have it in the foreground. Yeah. It's like it's a stupid quote, but Einstein once said, that when they ask him that he more or less proves that there are different realities. So, and he said, yeah, but in this reality, um, we have the best steaks. And yeah, but it was only part of it. And he said, and about the ego loss, he said, like, yeah, but it's quite okay to understand that your ego is only like a momentum, but without it, I don't know who pays the rent. And and that's the things, and
Yes.
we need all parts.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's why I favor the Jungian path of individuation.
yeah,
Everyone's invited, but everyone behaves.
yeah.
Yeah.
And to accept the shadow also, that was Jung's thing. And it's not a bad thing, it is just part of me. Without the shadow, I cannot exist.
Shadow just shows the geographic location of the part,
Yeah.
not a reflection on the part itself.
And it can also be like, it was, as I said, I was living in the Caribbean on a little island once, and okay, there was a lot of sunshine naturally. And there was one guy that was helping me a little bit, Maurice, and he was a very spiritual person in a different way, you know. He also had insight. In the voodoo world, it's totally normal, it's nothing special. And he sometimes he gave me little advices, and he also realized when I had times of depression, and he was warning me a little bit. He said, like, you're all alone, like 3 miles outside of Martinique, you should be a little bit careful. Yeah. And, I said, but yeah, blah, 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 this is all so bad, and I can't. And I said, Wolfgang, why are you here? You are here because you love the sunshine, And I was like, yes. And he said, but listen, if you're in the sunshine, you have to accept that there are deep, deep, deep shadows. Huh? And at the moment, you're in the shadow. How wonderful, you know, because otherwise you get sunburned. And then he turned around and he said, and by the way, if you want it gray and flat, go back to your fucking country.
Yeah.
Mm.
I had a friend whose profile photo on WhatsApp read, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow.
The darker the shadow.
Yeah. And it normally, it works that
So,
way.
yeah,
That's the law of the
yeah.
universe. Well, I'm afraid that that's all the time we have for. It has been
Don't be afraid.
an absolute pleasure talking to you, hearing your experience. Thank you very much, Wolfgang. Do you want to leave us with a last word of wisdom or something that you wish I'd asked you and I haven't?
No, no, no. I was really happy doing this. This is like, This is why I participate in all this stuff, because it always adds something. And quite honestly, but this is something that the listeners won't understand, But watching you changing from the beginning until now, you should, like, if you have a recording, you should watch yourself. You opened up when you talk about your inner child, and you look like a 16-year-old. I don't know if it is Photoshop or like whatever, but that's the magic. We can have access to this side of us. It's there. It's always there. Even when you die, it's still there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm firmly convinced of that. But thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us today, and see you again soon. Psychedelics in Recovery is a peer-led fellowship guided by anonymity, non-endorsement, and mutual respect. Thank you for listening and for placing principles before personalities.